I would like to introduce today's lecturer from FAO, Jose Valls. I'm sorry for the pronunciation, Bedeau. I'm not sure for the correct pronunciation. He is a program officer in the strategic program on inclusive and efficient food system in FAO. Today, it will be a one lecture session, and Jose will give us information and will lecture on transforming agri-food systems in the post-COVID-19 implication for sustainability in mountain areas. So I would like to welcome Jose and give him the floor, please.
Thank you very much, Danilo. Good morning, good afternoon to everyone in the room today. As Danilo was saying, my name is Jose VallsBedeau. I am so it was very well pronounced. I am a policy officer in the Food Systems and Food Safety Division here at FAO, and we will go together today through this session on sustainable food systems and how transforming food systems can help us build back better from the COVID-19, and specifically looking at some specific aspects of the mountain areas. So my specialty is more from the food systems perspective entry point, but I hope you will find yourselves also within the interface with the mountain context, and that we can have a very fruitful discussion. The idea is to have like the lecture as it was requested, but also, of course, feel free to interact in the chat, and also after each session we will have a time for interaction, question and answers. But especially I would encourage you to be as to have this session as interactive as possible, also bringing your experiences and discussing also even among yourselves. So very happy to be here, and looking forward to these sessions. In reality, it will be I know the structure is 4 slots. Maybe we'll have a little bit less, but then we can have more time at the end for more discussion or for an activity that we have prepared for you at the end. So I will start sharing. I also understand that you have been together already since last week in the different sessions of the courses. So, well, it's a pleasure to meet you all. I guess between yourselves you start to know you a little bit since last week, but yeah, feel free to interact and to have like questions, etc., and we can have a discussion session at the end of each module. So with this, I hope I'm sharing the presentation.
Yes, we see the PowerPoint.
Okay, perfect. So this is, let me put this here. So this is basically what we were saying, what we will be discussing today. And just to give you an overview of how the session will be structured, there are 2 main parts. One that will look at agri-food systems transformation. So from the very basic concepts to the current situation globally, but also in terms of the mountain context, the need for agri-food system transformation. What is this that we are hearing more and more in these last years or months even about the food system transformation? What does it mean in the context of mountain areas? Then we will have a little break with some, after the agri-food system transformation, we'll have some time for discussion, question answer, a little like technical break until we get into the agri-food systems in mountains. We will go through how the COVID-19 has impacted specifically agri-food systems, and what are opportunities also, because the impact is not just the negative impact, but also some of the opportunities that have been highlighted with this crisis for improving the sustainability of agri-food systems also in mountain areas. There we will do another break, like another space for questions, answers, and discussion, and then a little technical break, and we will go to the last session of the last section of today's session, which will be on international processes and the global policy context. So looking at the SDGs that I'm sure most of you know quite a lot about already, looking at the UN System Summit and how that can link also with the topic we have here, the mountains especially, and also possible other international mechanisms that can be helpful or useful in your work. So the idea is in the end to provide you with an overall view of what is a sustainable food systems approach, what it entails, and how it relates to the development in mountain areas. This is the first objective. Then the second objective we would have is how to get a bit more knowledge and awareness about how COVID-19 has affected the sustainable food system, the food systems, and what opportunities, as I was saying, have come up more clearly for more sustainable food systems. And then also the part on the international process is the idea, and this was also requested when we discussed about this session, to have a background on relevant international processes that can be relevant and that can be important to know and to eventually linked to in your work. So we will go through this content. I hope you will find it useful. I hope you will find it also relevant to what you are doing. And as I was saying, I'm looking forward also for those discussion sessions and to learn from you as well. So let's go with the beginning of the presentation, which was on the concepts on the food systems approach. As you know, and you may have seen a lot of these very complex representations of food systems. It's true that there are different ways of representing this complexity and multiple frameworks that look at the different interactions, the different interlinkages among the components of the food system. And in reality, it's needed to navigate through this complexity. It requires these conceptual frameworks to be able to diagnose and to identify complex food systems problems, but also design the context-specific interventions, as we will see later. So as you see, there can be different approaches. There are some that are more complex, some that are maybe simpler, some that use an entry point from nutrition, others use an entry point more from the environmental dimensions. But in the end, what is important is that the framework can consider all the elements as a whole, so not separately, because as all systems, a change in one of the parts of the system can have a very big impact in another part of the system, and this is what we will see also, these synergies and trade-offs between different elements of the system. When we change one, the other one also changes, so we have to be careful when we take also decisions and policy decisions on them. Also, very often focusing only on one little part of the system may make us overlook many of the causes of that problem that we wanted to solve that might be in other parts of the system. So the conceptual frameworks can help in that. And sorry, do I pass the slide? And in the end, all frameworks, whatever shape they take, they should capture the complexity of the interrelationship between the drivers that are what we see here in this one. So all the drivers of change that have an impact on the functioning of the food system, and then in the end on the different outcomes of the system. This framework, maybe some of you know it already, it's the one that was defined by the high-level panel of experts of the CFS, the Committee on World Food Security, and it looks, as I was saying, at the drivers, at the functioning of the system, looking at the food supply chain, so the different stages, looking at the food environments. We will go more in detail into that later, and in the end to the diets that determine both nutritional and health outcomes, but also social, economic, and environmental impacts. So in a nutshell, this is the let's say the complexity of a food system. Okay, just to give also some definitions of what we understand by the agri-food system, we conceptualize it as the entire range of actors and their interlinked value-added activities involved in the production, aggregation, processing, distribution, consumption, and disposal of products that originate from agriculture, from forestry, or fisheries. So agriculture from the broad perspective. Agri-food systems operate also within and are also connected to natural resource environment, to climate, to the economy, and to the society. This is a very important point, is starting to be very much looked at in these recent years. So looking much beyond the food and the production element itself. For example, when we think about what types of crops can be grown in a particular area or what is their nutritional quality, all that will be determined by climatic conditions, by the soil quality, by resource availability, but also by the structure of the markets, many other factors that can potentially be impacted also by other drivers like climate change, etc. So it's a matter of looking at all the elements together and not disregarding part. Of course, the sustainability is a way to measure performance of this agri-food system in delivering food and nutrition security. To generate food security and nutrition for future generation is not compromised. So this is the very basic sustainability concept. So one thing that we were seeing also before is that it's not just about the interactions within the agri-food system itself, as we were seeing in the other figure, but it's also about what is the interaction with other systems, because the agri-food system itself is very much determined by, for example, in this case, we see the environmental system, the health system, but also the economic and governance system that is in a particular context, country or subnational area. Also science and innovation systems, the social protection system. So all these different systems that are not necessarily about food or agri-food, but that have can have a big influence in it. So when we think about the solutions and how to improve sustainability, it's not about only looking at the agri-food system, let's say, boundaries, but we have to consider also the other systems. Okay, here again another representation of the agri-food system and the main elements. But what I wanted to highlight in this slide is first that the system is dynamic, that it's in constant evolution. It's not, we see the frameworks and it looks like everything is calculated and easy to predict, but the reality, as we know, is completely different. It's very dynamic, in constant evolution, all the different elements, but also the different drivers. So it needs a really close follow-up to really know how to deal with it in every moment. And then the second element I wanted to highlight here is the center of these circles, let's say. It needs to be people-centered. The agri-food system, we're talking here about food security and nutrition. We're talking here about sustainability dimensions. And then it's important not to get lost, as we do sometimes, in the technical elements of the supply chain or the environment aspects, but really to center it on the people who are in the end the main actors of these systems, and they are the main target that we have now in order to improve them. So without focusing on sustainability and on people, the rest of elements will probably not work. And this is what we are seeing actually in many situations, that the system is becoming dysfunctional precisely because they are not, all the sustainability dimensions are not being considered, and the people that is behind the systems and that the system is supposed to serve are not put on the front. Okay, so this was for the overview of the concept definitions. Of course, we can go more in detail, but just to give you a quick snapshot. Then let's go now to the where do we stand? So to the context, the current context and situation globally to start with, and maybe starting with these trends. Now it's important to unpack the main global trends that are affecting the way food is produced, distributed, consumed, to see in the end the situation, and then where are challenges and opportunities that we can use to improve. We know that the world population is continuing to increase. By 2050, there are projected to be 2 billion additional people. And in this context, also food demand, of course, is projected to continue increasing. The thing is, we don't know exactly in what terms it will increase the food demand, because this will depend a lot on the dietary patterns and the consumer food choices in the next decades, and also in the ability to reduce food losses and waste, which can diminish the demand considerably. Urbanization is one of the big phenomena of these times, let's say. Rural depopulation is as you know, and I'm sure you live with it, many of you, is a major trend impacting farming system that has profound implications also in agriculture itself, in labor constraints in agriculture, in shifting also division of labor between gender, in favoring labor-saving practices, which have also their drawbacks. And at the same time, we are seeing also that the growth of small and medium-sized towns is contributing, on the other hand, to revitalize some of the rural areas that are surrounding these small and medium-sized towns. So they have a very important role in activating the rural transformation, actually, even if they are considered urban contexts. So urbanization has also its two phases, no? Some negative impacts also on the changes in the diets, for example, where we see that it's bringing much more processed food, much more concentration on resource-intensive food like meat, dairy, etc. But at the same time, it can also be used as an opportunity to revitalize and to transform the rural areas. Globalization is also, of course, one of the big phenomena, and it's a combination of the emergence of in the food arena of global food firms, of the liberalization of trade, also technological changes in logistics, in the processing, in the distribution of food. But still, there are also an increased, let's say, concern about labor condition, about environmental costs of this globalization, concerns about traceability, the origin of food, etc., that are also in a way created an interest towards improving local food systems, so towards the localization also of the food systems, and improving, let's say, shortening the supply chains in this context of globalization. No? Then, of course, climate change, we will talk about it a bit later. You also have, I think, a specific session on that. The pandemic, it's also something we will discuss. And then there are also some forces that can drive transformational changes in these systems, given these trends, these longer term trends. For example, the innovation and some disruptive technologies that are coming up, the shift in power dynamics, and we're seeing that very much as a result of corporate retail that is gaining more control and kind of dictating more the standards of the system, but also natural disasters, transboundary pests and diseases. Of course, we are seeing the effects of pandemics like COVID, etc. So now let's go to a closer look to after looking at these trends, we see that in this context also it's clear that the world is not on track with the SDG targets, with the 2030 agenda target, and neither with the target on achieving food security and nutrition. So there is recent data that actually is being presented today with the state of food insecurity in the world that will be launched in the high-level political forum in New York. That tell us that the number of undernourished people in the world is continuing to increase. Already since 6 years, it has been in little rise, and now with COVID-19, it has jumped a little bit more. We are now at around 720 and 811 million people that cannot eat according to their needs, their energy needs, and we have seen this increase in 160 million people since last year. So most due to the pandemic and to the crisis that followed the pandemic, but also other aspects like conflicts, etc., that are still there. So what is clear is that we are going backwards instead of getting to the target of eradicating hunger. We are really going backwards. In terms of nutrition, we can see also some progress on some of the indicators, like, for example, standing, breastfeeding, but still this progress is not enough to achieve the global targets that the world has for nutrition. The world is the countries, but everyone, all the people, you, me, etc. And we are looking here at the targets for the World Health Assembly that are 2025 targets, but also the targets for SDG 2 on malnutrition for 2030. We still see that 22% of children under 5 years of age are stunted. 30% of women on reproductive age have anemia, so deficiency in iron. And at the same time, obesity is on the rise in all regions of the world. It's not anymore a problem of the developed and industrialized economies and countries. Now it's really spreading regardless of the level of development, and sometimes even spreading even faster in developing parts of the world. Given, as we were saying before, to the globalization of consumption patterns, but also of lifestyles, etc. So apart from this food security, nutrition, we're getting to another dimension that we were looking before. That is that the food system, the agri-food systems, the way they are operating now, they are fueling climate change. They are, of course, affected also by climate change, but they are also part of the causes. Agriculture is actually a major cause of biodiversity loss. It's the largest consumer of the world's freshwater resources, with 70% of the freshwater is used by agriculture worldwide. Also, more than 1/4 of the energy used globally is used on food production and food supply. So it's a contributor to environmental degradation as well. At the same time, we are seeing that 14% of the food that is produced globally is lost from the post-harvest to the retail level. And at the same time, 17% of the food is waste, of the food produced is wasted. So this means that these losses and waste is really at the same time a loss and waste of resources, because all the resources that were used to produce those food that are lost along the way or that are wasted at the end are being also lost and wasted. So by solving this problem, we would really make already a big difference in terms of resources management. Here we see, for example, another indicators that systems are contributing up to 29% of the total greenhouse gas emissions. At the same time, the global impact of climate change on food system is widespread, and it's quite complex. In reality, it's ranging from changing seasonal patterns to increased conflict over natural resources and also food security. We know also that climate change is exacerbated by poor socioeconomic conditions, so it affects disproportionately the low and income small producers. And here again, a link between the environmental impact and in this case, socioeconomic dimensions. Here we see also one of the possible effects, of course, not only of the agri-food systems, but as we've seen, they are a major contributor to biodiversity loss. There are some scenarios here on how would be the trend from now to the 21st century. So with the increased conservation efforts through sustainable consumption and production, so really changing our consumption and production patterns, how would it be here in yellow with increased conservation efforts, but without changing our production and consumption patterns, so without taking a systems approach? And then in gray, the dramatic situation, if we keep with business as usual, how things would look in terms of biodiversity. Also, agri-food systems are by far the world's largest economic system. These measured in terms of employment, in terms of livelihood, but also in terms of planetary impact, as we were seeing just before. There is 1 billion people worldwide that is employed through agri-food system production, harvesting, services, processing, distribution, all the different phases of the supply chain. And we see also that at the same time, poverty and inequality are kind of endemic to food systems, because more than 80% of the extreme poor live in rural areas. And of these extreme poor, 75% earn their livelihoods or their living through agri-food systems. So it's very much linked also with especially rural poverty. And as such, agri-food systems could play a major role in eradicating poverty, in particular in rural areas, so long, of course, as they are inclusive and sustainable. We also see that food networks that span the rural continuum, as we were seeing before, present an opportunity to support inclusive and sustainable transformation by leveraging the urban demand and improving, in the end, the rural-urban linkages and the conditions of rural populations. And we see also that, and we will see later, that an important portion of these jobs was really at risk after COVID-19 pandemic, and especially in the latter parts of the chain, like processing, services, and distribution, which are where also a higher proportion of women are normally employed. So they were especially particularly affected in this case. So in the end, we've seen a number of the challenges that food systems are facing. First, how to eliminate poverty and reducing all forms of inequalities by 2030, how to reduce agri-food systems' footprint on land, water, greenhouse gas emissions, biodiversity, etc. And at the same time, how to prevent transboundary and emerging agri-food system threats. In this context, it appears clear, and I don't think there is much doubt about that. Business as usual is no longer an option, and we need transformative changes of the agri-food systems. So let's go now to this part on the transformation, on the need for agri-food system transformation. Okay, I don't know if there are. Okay, it's mostly greetings in the chat. Good. So let me go now here to the evolution of the food systems. The world's food systems have undergone notable transitions actually over the past century, from traditional to more industrial and intensified food systems, but also with different degrees of development. Traditionally, what we've seen is that in most countries, a sectoral approach has prevailed when looking at food systems, and the main attention has been normally on primary production and the economic entry points of food systems. For example, consumers were usually not part of the picture, but also social and environmental dimensions were very insufficiently addressed with this very sectoral approach. So the sustainable food systems approach is more holistic and more multi-sectorial and multi-stakeholder is emerging as an evolution from these previous paradigms that were not providing the responses to an improvement on the agri-food systems. Of course, the shifts between the different types of systems are not linear. There are many different situations in between. This is a simplification. Okay, so given the context and the challenges that we have been seeing, and we saw that business as usual was definitely not an option. So it's clear that transformative change is needed to ensure these inclusive, sustainable, resilient food systems that we need and that leave no one behind. What do we mean when we say sustainable food systems or promoting more sustainable food systems? Basically, it's looking at the three sustainability dimensions. So looking, for example, on the economic dimension, that the activities should generate benefits and economic value added, but for all categories of stakeholders. So wages for workers, taxes for governments, profits for enterprises, and food supply, of course, for consumers. In terms of the social dimensions, we are looking at ensuring an equitable distribution of that economic added value, taking into account especially the most vulnerable groups. And for example, food system activities should contribute also to advancing important sociocultural outcomes like nutrition, health, but also tradition, rights, labor conditions, animal welfare, etc. This would be on the social dimension. And on the environmental dimension, the impacts of food system activities on the environment should be neutral or positive, and taking into consideration all these factors that we've been looking at. So the difficulty is how to combine the three dimensions and get a result that has positive or neutral outcomes in the three at the same time. As I see, the space where you have SFS, sustainable food system, is the most reduced one, but it's the one we have to look for. So this is about the food systems transformation. And let me get back. Okay. So in the end, it's what we are saying when we say also transformation, we are thinking about changing paradigms. We can't continue thinking as we were before. So here you have some examples of what is this transition about, or this transformation about. So not, as I was saying, taking out the focus from productivity as the prime driver and looking at other elements and the system efficiency in terms of healthy diets, in terms of sustainable food systems, instead of looking at producing more and producing cheaper food, really looking at the different values associated with food. So not just the price, but also the sustainable practices, the cultural aspects, etc. Not, for example, focusing only on the producers or the economic actors, but also looking at the consumers, looking at civil society. This is something that is starting to change as well. So these are some of the very big changes in mindset that we need. We are starting to see in some contexts, but there's still a way to go. Another one is the last one on finding. The focus was before on finding globally applicable solutions. So how do we find the solution from the global perspective, and then we bring it to the local level? while now the focus is much more put on understanding what are the context-specific aspects of food systems. What is becoming clear also is that food systems, there is not one food system, there are plenty, and they are all different. They are all very much context-specific. So we have to be looking at this specificity when looking at what possible solutions they have. And it's a specificity in terms of not only the climatic solutions, but also agro conditions, but also socio-politic, economic, etc. So for the moment, I don't know if there are any questions or comments so far on this picture that we have of the current agri-food systems, the current impacts, and the need for change. And then we can continue a little bit, but I don't know. I don't see. I don't know if I would see them from here.
There is a couple of questions in the chat. So from Anu, the fact that food system is dynamic and constantly evolving, does the diagram food system transformation framed with economic, social, and environmental capture the complex interdependencies and interface that determine the pathway for transformation? And then how can we make the transformation framework as robust and comprehensive as the food system framework?
Okay, on the first one, I gather it's more a comment than a question. A comment on the complexity of the system and the fact that it's dynamic that adds complexity, or I missed the specific question.
Could I just ask directly?
Sure.
Yeah, so hi, thank you. I really loved the fact that you really appreciated this whole concept of food system that is very much built around the complex thinking, right? System perspective. And when you are presenting this whole idea of transforming the food system, right? Our idea of what does it mean? Then there is a very much very rigorous, how do we say, very commonly used framework that is economic, environment, and social. We are actually very much reducing the complex issue, but through a very narrow framework for a transformative, thinking. So I was wondering, should that framework for transformative thinking and pathways for food system also not be as elaborative and as comprehensive as the framework that you have presented for the food system? So that was my question.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, in reality, it should. The difficulty also with the trust, because one thing is to picture the framework itself, the system itself, but then, as I was saying, the transformation of the system implies very much to take into account the specificity of each system, of each context. So this is where maybe it's difficult to have a representation of this transformation process that can be applicable to many different systems. No, each particular context and system in the end, like local food systems, or if we take a country or like subnational level, will be different depending on the different elements. So the transformation will be different. So I think it would be difficult to represent as a framework the transformation itself. Maybe the big lines, they could take the lines of the systems of the agri-food systems framework, but the transformation will need to be much more, as we were saying, much more dynamic and much more context specific. So I don't know if I'm replying to the question, but this is what I. And now I will go.
Just to add to that, then does that mean that the space between the concept as is, right, the food system, and then actual transition that should happen in wherever, whether it's country specific or local space specific, so the in between is the work where you have to really try to should we consider that as a gap, or should we consider that space as a space where more attention is needed because with a broader framework and then trying to apply that in a relevant a specific context, there is a big gap, right, in between what is the idea of transformation for that particular setting.
Yes, definitely. And actually, I think it's the next slide, but it goes a little bit in that direction of starting to put this interface between the framework and the context realities, let's say, But definitely, I wouldn't say it's a gap. I think there's a lot of work, especially in the last years, that has been done in looking at closing that gap between the theoretic concept of food systems and the realities, and that gap is that space is basically what are possible policy actions that can be undertaken and what are options. And we will see at the end of the session today also on the Food Systems Summit, the whole objective of the summit is precisely to cover that gap between the global concepts and the realities on the ground. So I think it's being developed, and now we will see some examples, and then when we talk about the summit, we will see other examples. But I think we are, as a community, let's say, we are going in that direction indeed. But thank you very much for the question, because it's really, really spot on. This is the main problem, how to go from food systems, and which can be easy, or well, they are complex, but they can be easy to understand theoretically, but then how to apply it, it's so, because it's so context specific, it's so difficult to land on the ground. But we are getting there. Shall I continue, or thanks, Anu?
Okay, there are more questions. Another one from Pranay. The supply chain system of the sustainable farming products faces challenges, including local products do not have competitive advantage over imported products, lack of information and communication between buyer and seller, and a number of middlemen involved who enjoy larger margins than the farmers. This is just a comment.
Yes.
Not just, this is a comment.
Wait, yeah, no, it's very relevant, and we will go into part of that later in the session on looking at how to valorize local products, on these links between producers and consumers or buyers, etc. So very relevant.
Okay, then we move to the question from Claudia. In one of the slides, it's pointed out that we need an interconnection of green growth and inclusive growth. I was wondering, what is your point of view regarding degrowth?
Regarding, sorry?
Degrowth, the opposite of growth.
Okay. No, thanks. Yeah, well, it's one of the theories, I think, of the approaches, let's say, or the theories that are put also up front. I don't know. I don't know what I can say. The trends, and that is also what the slide was saying, is that the trends are this growth, and what I see is that also the trend in the way of thinking, and there is not yet a shift in this going towards growth and looking at degrowth, which in some aspects, of course, it's difficult to discuss this in 2 minutes here, but in some aspects it can have it has a good rationale, it can have a good benefits, but as I say, it's also theoretical models in the end. We have to also look at what is the reality of each context. But yeah, so I wouldn't go much, but this could be a topic for maybe a couple of hours or more discussion. But yeah, thanks. No, it's good to raise it.
Okay. Sijuti is asking, the small producers are finding it difficult to adjust to globalization of food system. How can we help them to adjust to the new paradigm?
Okay, so this is what in the following slides, let's say later in the session, we will touch a little bit on that and on possible opportunities for smallholders to really these effects of globalization in looking for their own markets, in accessing also resources, etc. So we will go through that through some examples at least of that later.
Okay, I guess now we have the last questions, because then we would like to have a 5-minute break, and then we can go further in the lecture. This one is from Joao. Working animals appear in your presentation as part of the traditional system, but today it's proven that animal energy is a local, modern, renewable, clean source of energy. In your opinion, do you also see it as a part of the post-industrial model?
Sorry, can you repeat? What do I see as a part of?
In your opinion, do you also see it, the animal working animal energy, as a part of the post-industrial model?
Oh. I must say I'm not an expert in livestock in general. I wouldn't. Oops, sorry. I wouldn't enter at this stage on that question. But we can continue thinking about it and maybe later. Actually, I hadn't finished the first part, but I don't know if we have to stop here. I still have some slides for the second part, for this part, but we can do them either now or after the break.
No, if it is okay for you, we can continue. No problem. It's up to you. We stop at a little bit now for these questions. So if you want, you can continue with the next slides.
Okay. Yeah, I can continue with these ones, and then we can have some more questions and comments and a break at that point.
Okay. So please.
Okay, thanks. Just also coming back to the initial question on how to start thinking about the transformation. So as example, no, how to go about it with concrete actions. What are concrete actions that can help going towards that transformation? This comes from the Global Panel on Agriculture and Food Systems for Nutrition, where they looked at a number of policy actions, priority policy actions, that are grouped here, as you see, in four main categories. But you already have some of the examples of concrete actions towards the transformation, looking at these different dimensions. No, so for example, looking at producing the right mix of foods, both staple foods but also nutrient-rich foods, in sufficient quantities to deliver the sustainable and healthy diets that are the objectives, but also some of the actions looking at ensuring that the foods are accessible by everyone. So some activities throughout the value chains, but also looking at the trade, looking at food losses and waste. And then one of the components on ensuring that foods are also affordable to everyone, because, well, we jump that part, but one of the big problems that we are seeing is that reality are not being affordable for more than 3 billion people in the world. So the affordability of healthy diets, of diets that are of adequate nutrient, adequate energy, but also adequate safety conditions is almost a luxury, no? So how to make them affordable through social protections, through policy interventions on costs of production, also on price, and then how to ensure that they are desirable to all consumers. So looking at food-based dietary guidelines, looking at marketing, of food marketing, looking also at labels, etc. That we will see more in detail. The thing is that the main aspect here is we have a list of possible actions. The important thing is that the actions, they need to come in concert. They need to be coordinated. For example, if we increase the supply of nutrient-rich food like fruits and vegetables, for example, we can increase the supply, but that doesn't mean that they will be more consumed. For example, if individuals are not convinced or persuaded that they need to consume them more, or they will not, it will not work either. For example, we have the investments or enough investments that are fresh food. It's not just about one of the solutions. It's how they come together. Most importantly lies. But as we were saying, there are solutions. We know a lot of them. The problem that we have is that we don't necessarily know how they fit together in specific, in particular contexts. And also we know that very often the different solutions will produce winners and losers. So we have to look at what are these trade-offs that are appearing between different solution trade-offs in terms of different outcomes, different sustainability dimensions, etc. So here's some of the example of these trade-offs, because this is where we are starting to tackle this complexity, that we were seeing. The framework is there, but then the identifying what are the trade-offs and being able to manage them is what would help us moving towards the transformation. So here are some examples. For example, one of them is when we look at internalizing the environmental externalities of food production. We want to ensure access to sufficient and nutritious food for all. But if we would apply the costs that involves into the food prices, it's most likely that the food prices would increase, and therefore we would maybe left out of access to the most vulnerable population that could not afford that food. So in a way, applying internalizing the externalities of, for example, environmental costs to the food would help producing in a more environmental friendly way, let's say, or respecting environment, but at the same time it could restrain the access of poor people, especially to food. So these are the kind of trade-offs that need to be balanced and that are so complex in real life. Another very classical one is the one on the meat consumption, and especially ruminant meat consumption. If we reduce the consumption, then there would be a benefit probably on the emissions, on the greenhouse gas emissions. But at the same time, we could remove the protein availability from populations that where maybe there is a low availability. So that would produce a trade-off. We can reduce consumption, but then it can be a damage in places, for example, where protein availability is not that high. And then it would also have an impact on the incomes of farmers. It could have an impact on the landscapes themselves, on biodiversity, in very complex ways that are maybe not even studied. So this is one of the very classical trade-offs that are put on the table and that are discussed every day on measure like reducing meat consumption. Yes, it can have benefits, but at the same time there are some trade-offs that need to be taken into account. So this trade-off aspect is one of the keys of the food system transformation in reality, because this is what needs to be addressed. For that, they need to be assessed. So they need to be identified, these trade-offs across the whole system and across the whole outcomes, there has to be also a system to track the performance, like through indicators, through indices, but also in order to really look at the trade-offs using more sophisticated tools like models, etc. And one important point also is that addressing the trade-offs is something we have to do not only through the economic dimension, but also sometimes it's competing, as we were saying before, with environmental objectives, with societal objectives. So it will require a negotiation in the end, and this is where also we see that there are different actors, different perceptions, different interests, different resources, and differences in power of different actors. So this is what makes even more difficult taking these decisions and deciding on the trade-offs. Just to give an example, you may have seen this already on the asymmetries of power that we can find in food systems. No, we see that food is grown by millions of farmers worldwide, 1.5 billion we have there, and every person in the world eats the food in the end. No, so we have this 7.5 billion that are eating, but between those producers and those consumers, let's say, there is an increasingly concentration of power and of in the end the decision making in these resources. No, we see some examples there even in the supply chain side with some companies that are really controlling most of the market in agrochemicals, in different type of inputs, but also at the level of food and beverage processing, the top 10 companies are controlling 90% of the market. So the industrialization and intensification of the agri-food systems have brought this concentration of power that now needs to be unpacked in order to address also some of these trade-offs. This was just an example, but just to say that transitioning towards food systems and towards more sustainability, it requires also inclusive approaches and participatory approaches that allow especially the most vulnerable, the smallholder producers, etc., to have participation in the decision making, but also to have access to resources, to the finance, to the information that is needed to participate in that decision making. And more we are hearing about the importance of strengthening the agency component of the agency dimension of the food systems. That is having all people being able to, or having the capacity to decide what they produce, what they consume, how they produce it, how they consume it, etc. So this is one of the big challenges as well. Let's say the political challenge, no, because we are faced, of course, to many technical challenges when we talk about addressing the trade-offs. We can see that a lot of analysis, technical analysis, scientific data, information is needed, but it's not sufficient because many of the decisions involve also social and political aspects. No, so in the end, the decision, the transformation is not only a technical decision; it's also very often political, like a political process. So this is what also makes very important to build, not only to look at the analysis of the different parts, how they fit together, etc., but also to build coalitions of actors to try to have a multi-stakeholder approach, involve the different relevant actors to have, in the end, to have a discussion based on the evidence, based on the data, but to have a discussion and a kind of a negotiation on how to move towards more sustainability, taking into account the differences of interest, of resources, of powers, etc. And just to end this part, like a very snapshot of one case to see how broad the range of actors and stakeholders that need to be involved in decisions can be. No, this is from a case in a producer-consumer network in Bolivia. So we have all different actors from the production, from the consumption, from the policy level, from the private sector level, how they need to come together. And this is just an example of how do you call it, a power interest matrix that looks at, okay, how is each actor positioned in terms of power and in terms of interest, in order to know how to start working together towards common objectives. But yeah, mainly to give also this snapshot about the complexity in terms of the actors, not just the elements that we were seeing before. So here I would leave it for the moment for also some more discussion and maybe your own experiences or your own thoughts. Be an open discussion, not just bilateral. And then we will continue after a little break, maybe on the sustainable food systems in mountains. We look at the chat.
This is Piyush. Can I just ask the question without using the chat box?
Sure, please.
Sure. Yeah. So I don't really come with so much of a background in food systems, but there are certain priorities, or you could say non-negotiable. So if you look at aspects like, say, stunting or malnutrition or even wastage, I would think that they definitely are non-negotiable areas to address. So, while we're trying to address everything, including climate change and so many other complex aspects, do we find more success or more possibility of success if one is looking at some of these non-negotiables and try and address those, even if it means that certain others may not get the required attention? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that's a good question and a good point. No, this should be the case. The problem, I guess, is what are these non-negotiables? No, this is the main issue also, and we will see later. We'll talk a little bit about the Food System Summit. There are so many discussions about that. What are the non-negotiables? Because for some sectors or some stakeholders, the non-negotiables are maybe the ones you mentioned, or the human rights, which of course the human rights should not be negotiable should not be non-negotiable or should not be negotiable, sorry, in any case. But for some sectors, the non-negotiables are others. So maybe what would be needed indeed as a first step is to agree on what are the non-negotiable aspects of the or outcomes of the food systems. But as I was saying, let's say the agreement is, from what we see also in the discussions on the summit, between different, not just governments, but also private sector, like companies, different stakeholders have very different views also on what is the negotiable and the non-negotiable. So even getting an agreement on that would already be, I think, indeed a very big step. But we are not there, I'm afraid.
Thanks.
Okay, there are questions in the chat room, or from Ryan, to change from not all relevant stakeholders are considered to consumers and civil society are key players. How can we support the society or farmers? They need plants, seeds, and equipment to do their job. And that's a lot expensive on them to buy. If we say governments should support them, some of the governments have a very weak economy.
You are putting me $1,000,000 questions. Indeed, this is one of the main challenges that many governments or many countries are facing. But some of them actually are innovating also in this kind of responses, and they are partnering, for example, with the private sector. So there are some public-private partnerships that are established so that, okay, maybe governments would work on infrastructures that allow, for example, roads or storage slaughterhouses that allow the production to happen. Then private companies would invest maybe on the production itself and would become the buyers of smallholder producers, and therefore they would maybe provide them with those inputs that they need. So there are different approaches. Yeah, even these public private partnerships in these countries where some normally it's more challenging because also the situation in the countries is already there's already an unbalance, no, between the private and the public. So it's sometimes more difficult, but this could be one of the solutions that we've seen also in many countries actually that is working. Apart from, yes, social protection schemes that take into account like the going from social protection to the next stage, no, and the production. But this, of course, needs budgets, which are not always available.
Okay, another question from Sejuti. In India, especially in this COVID pandemic time, only marketing has helped online marketing, has helped many mountains farmer producer organization to directly approach market. How much beneficial you think online marketing and retailing of food will be in the long run?
Yes, well, indeed, it has some opportunities that COVID has shed light on, no? The e-commerce and the online marketing. I think this is it didn't come just to cover some gaps in the COVID period. Now it came and it's there to stay. So I think it will also, with the development of the bandwidth, etc., more access from almost anywhere to internet. I think it's one of the activities that is going to develop very much in the next years. This online, because also it facilitates what we were saying before, that we will touch again, this direct contact with between the consumer, the end consumer, and the producer. Sometimes, no, it facilitates, and it could facilitate also some. We will talk later. The participatory guarantee systems, for example, where the consumer looks at. Provides the assessment of the criteria on how the producer is performing in terms of a set of criteria. So yes, the online systems are there to stay and providing a big help also, especially to open markets where it was not that easy to get one.
Okay, two more questions, and then if it is fine for you, we can have a short break.
Yes,
so the first
please.
one is national policy directives tend to focus on the major population hubs, including large cities and suburban settlements. This can have a smaller and vulnerable rural settlement, more isolated, and seemingly last to receive benefits from the various government initiatives. This is particularly true in developing and less developed countries, where governments are already dealing with issues of scarce resources with which to implement change. what will be the leverage point or way forward?
Another $1 million question, but very good questions. But yeah, indeed, this is one of the main problems, and we will see later also some of the data. One of the big challenges, especially in mountain areas, is the marginalization because of distance to more urban or semi-urban places. So yeah, I wouldn't really have an answer. If I had it, maybe I wouldn't be here right now. But yeah, indeed, it's one of the big issues. This isolation, which is not just the physical isolation for markets, for example, but also for so many other aspects, like, for example, this one of getting the social protection, no? Or getting the recovery programs, etc.
Okay, the last questions. In from Gulan Mohammad, in mountain areas due to COVID-19, the tourism community has suffered a lot, and especially climbers and people related to tourism industry. So they are facing food problems.
Yes, this is. We will also see that it's one of the effects of the COVID-19, no? In especially in areas that were very much dependent on tourism, ecotourism, etc. This is one of the sectors that has suffered much. But then we see how what we were seeing at the beginning of the different systems, how they are interconnected, no? Because okay, it's a pandemic, it's about health, but then the lockdowns are about economy, and we will see that now. But and then how they affect tourism, and that has an effect on food security and nutrition of the people whose livelihood is from tourism activities. So definitely, this is one of the big impacts of COVID-19, especially in many of the mountain areas.
Okay, thank you very much. Oh, sorry, I interrupted you.
No, I guess it was more a comment than a
Okay.
question itself. But yeah, I think it's very relevant.
So don't be shy.
No, the former one, I think it was a comment, but it's
okay.
done.
Okay, we'd like to thank you very much. We would like to stop for 5 minutes, and then we come back for the rest of the session. So see you in 5 minutes. Thank you very much, Jose.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much. Shall I continue?
Yes, please.
Yes. Okay. Thanks, Danilo. Okay, and thank you, everyone. Actually, I wanted to just start very quickly, because I read in the chat that question about the working animals and the different phases of food systems, and I apologize, but I got lost completely, and now I got the point. So just to say that indeed we didn't consider in rating that. I would think that the use of animal traction as energy source would be part of this post-industrial. Indeed, as you say, I don't remember who raised the issue, but because it's true that in this picture we focus the post-industrial on the consumption and the marketing methodologies, but not so much on the production. And actually, going back to animal traction could be part of this post-industrial. And this links actually also with the question on the degrowth, no, maybe to some extent. So I just wanted to make this point, and apologies because I thought the question was about something completely different, but I hope it's addressed now. So now I would like to go a little bit more into the specificities of the sustainable food systems, agri-food systems in the context of mountains. Okay. So just to give some very fact figures about mountains in relation to food systems. I'm sure you know them already. That mountains are home to 1.1 billion of people. They represent the 50% of world biodiversity hotspots. And they also represent a very important source of knowledge and technologies, traditional technologies that have their origin in mountain systems, and also that 62% of mountain people live in rural areas. Actually, which is important data when we talk, because you see that in my presentation there is a lot of reference to rural population, so to have a reference there. And of course, in those rural mountain areas, there is agricultural production as one of the main activities carried out by the population there, smallholder farmers, pastoralists, etc. Also, more and more linking to other activities to diversify. Okay, so mountains, as we were saying, they are home in reality and an origin of many agricultural techniques that have been developed over centuries, and that are systems that preserve natural resources, that promote the conservation of biodiversity, agrobiodiversity, and they are rich in biocultural diversity as well. One of the other features is the diversity of agricultural varieties, wild crops and animal breeds within mountain systems, no? And that ensures, of course, a diversified and in the end also affordable, healthy diets, and they increase the resilience of people to climate change. And then they also hold many ecosystems functions, no? Such as the protection and retention of slopes, the provision of fresh water to downstream population, etc. As far as, of course, they are well managed. So just a pause here to say that beyond the production and the agriculture part, that is what we were focusing on when thinking about food systems in the context of mountain and development of mountain areas. It's also very important to consider the food environment. If you remember, in this framework that we had at the beginning, where we had the supply chain, production, storage, transformation, distribution, etc. Then we had the food environment, and then we had the diets themselves, no? So the food environment in the end is where the consumer engages with the supply chain, and in the end with the whole food system. It refers, as you can see in the slide, to accessibility, so the physical proximity of food, which is one of the issues sometimes in the case of mountains, but also issues of prices, of marketing, including different labeling schemes that we will see also a bit later. Some specific quality and taste considerations that need to be undertaken and that can add value to the product in the end. And all these elements influence also the consumer food choices. So this is why they're so important to take into account, because even from the producer point of view, we know that all these different elements that we have in the food environment will influence the demand of specific foods. And therefore, they will have to influence also the supply chain and the way we produce it, we transform it, we package it, we label it, for example. So this is why I think it's important to consider this food environment component when looking at improving livelihoods through the food systems in mountains. Just to give some of the key challenges that food systems face in mountain areas. Here, as we can see, we have that 1 in 2 rural mountain dwellers in developing countries live in areas where basically there is vulnerability to food insecurity. So the availability of calories and protein are below the minimum threshold needed for having a healthy life. So one in 2 in rural mountain people in developing countries. Now, in the next slides, we will see also some of the key challenges and vulnerabilities and causes of food insecurity in mountain areas. For example, and we were discussing this later about the marginalization. Mountain people are often marginalized with limited access to infrastructure, to markets, to education, to capacity building, to digitalization, but also to relief programs or subventions, like it was mentioned before. No, so this is often caused by poverty and inequality, but it's also contributing at the same time to poverty and inequality. And mountains people distance is also a challenge for participating in decision making, because the distance makes it more difficult to participate, and this is another cause of further marginalization. These two maps that we see here, and they come from a publication that was done by FAO with UNCCD on vulnerability of mountain peoples to food insecurity. And in these two maps, we see one of them is about the travel distance from food markets, and all in mountain areas, and the limited access. The other one is on the presence and access to infrastructure and services. So we see clearly that there is isolation that we were talking about before, and the distance from food markets, but also the limited access to services, to facilities, is part of what undermines mountain people's capacity to cope with the lack of food availability itself. No, so then being a direct cause of food insecurity. We have that here that 85 million rural mountain people lived more than 1 hour's travel distance from the closest market. And this is correlated, of course, with the vulnerability to food insecurity, because 41% of those were vulnerable to food insecurity. So there's a clear correlation there. Okay, also there is a correlation with the capacity to cope with emergencies or crises. People living in marginal areas normally have a limited capacity to develop adaptive measures that can help them face these crises. And like on the contrary, people even in rural areas, but that are closer to markets, closer to services, to infrastructure, they have more an increased coping capacity to diversify, etc., that can offer them more options to access food and to have a greater diversity in terms of quality, in terms of prices, etc. So it affects also the coping, the resilience, let's say, capacity. Then another of the big challenges for food insecurity in mountain food systems is natural hazards that, of course, not only impact the environment itself of the mountain, but they severely affect as well the lives and the livelihoods of mountain people, with negative effects that can persist for several years. No, these are effects, long-term negative effects. The agriculture sector, we know, is particularly affected by climate-induced disasters, and you have examples there in the graph: floods, drought, tropical storms, etc. And as we were saying before, also the more the poorer the population and the more isolated or in marginalized area, the more dependent on agriculture, which gives also an idea of the vulnerability. The impact of disasters also go beyond agriculture, and this is something we were also saying before like you were saying before in the discussions, because beyond agriculture they can also cause unemployment, purchasing capacity, restrict the access to food, but also have an effect on other activities like tourism, no? Which is what you were saying before. So this can restrict in the end the access, the affordability, but also the access physically to food in times of or in the event of a disaster or a shock. Okay, we see also land degradation is one of the very big impacts that agriculture in mountains is suffering, and this, of course, endangers also the sustainability of the production, but also of the animal husbandry and water security. So land degradation is one of the big challenges faced, and we also see a correlation between this challenge of land degradation and the vulnerability to food insecurity. The numbers of population affected by land degradation that we see here was directly correlated with the ones presenting vulnerability to food insecurity. And it's a bit, of course, the depletion of natural resources is behind the food insecurity situation, but also the food insecurity situation calls sometimes for more pressure into the natural resources. Then this is one of the main causes also that in the past editions of the State of Food Insecurity in the World that FAO produces with other UN agencies, conflicts are highlighted as one of the causes, the number one causes of food insecurity and chronic hunger in the world. So this is also where when we were seeing before the numbers of hungry people, the rise in the last years was especially due to conflicts in different parts of the world. Here we have the data for the mountains, and we know that there are 212 million rural people living in mountains lived in mountains in areas where there was a level of conflict, medium or high intensity of conflict in the last 10 years. And not 10 years, in the last, well, now 20 years, from 2000 to 2018. And of those, 128 million were vulnerable to food insecurity. So again, the correlation there very, very clearly. Okay, and then apart from all these challenges from the mountains, we had COVID-19 last year, with like exacerbating a lot of these challenges, but also bringing others. We will go now through some of the effects more at global level, and then we will come back again to mountains. As we were saying, COVID-19 has complicated things further. The situation was already not very good, and we saw the data for the achievement of the SDGs, etc. We were behind in most of them, but then now with COVID, the situation has got worse, has worsened. And as we were saying, COVID-19, it was a health problem, but then especially with the lockdown policies, it directly contributed to different crises, like, for example, the disruption in the supply chains, the disruption in different social protection services, but especially the global economic recession that we are still in the middle of, and not seeing we are, I think, still seeing the top of the iceberg, but that is going to also affect a lot of the response capacity from a lot of governments that already had, for example, low budgets, etc., as we were saying before. So all this has an effect, of course, on the food system. It's not restricted to the agri-food systems, but it definitely we are seeing, and we saw the global numbers before, a very direct effect on the increased poverty and food insecurity. We got actually the first increase in extreme poverty in decades last year because of COVID. Just a little some of the aspects where COVID-19 has really challenged the agri-food systems. It has caused, as I was saying before, immediate disruptions throughout the food systems, but also in different parts of the value chain, and it has put in risk in the end the food supply in many instances, especially right after the crisis. Now it's more the economic effects that are becoming a challenge. Here you can see, for example, some of the results of a survey that FAO carried out to better understand the impact of COVID-19 on urban food systems, and it showed already some of the effects that we're seeing. No, the access to or availability of food, the closing, for example, of markets, of the restrictions to sell food in public spaces, of course, suspension of social protection systems, as for example, school meals that are a source of food, quality food in many cases, and also some rises in prices even. This is from the survey. But here, just more in general, to say that in the end, the COVID-19, it affected all the dimensions of food security and nutrition, and in the end, the different elements of the food system, as we were saying before. In terms of access, for example, there was a loss of jobs, loss definitely of income for due to the disruption in the chain and the stops in production. There was, as we were saying, the disruption in school meal programs. So a problem of physical access, but also economic access to food. Then in terms of the availability, also same thing with the disruptions in the chains and the labor shortages in different stages of the chain. For example, blocks for movements of temporary workers that could not reach their areas of work, and therefore also productions were lost and were not made available in the end. It also affected in a certain way, although maybe not as much as other crises, the price volatility, the export restrictions and restrictions on trade. It definitely also had an effect on consumption, on the utilization of food, and in many contexts, especially in urban surveys, it was seen there was a shift towards more processed food, more shelf-stable food, so packaged food rather than fresh. It also affected somehow the agency dimension that we were talking about before. Also, even because of the lockdowns and impossibility of demonstrating, of expressing sometimes the discontent or demonstrate even in the streets. And in the sustainability dimensions, also a very clear effect was on the food losses and waste, which rised. I don't know if some may remember the images that we were seeing about milk, for example, in the US or in Russia, that was literally thrown out because it wasn't possible to reach the market. But also in India, I remember there were cases where strawberries could not reach markets, and they were given to livestock as feed because in order at least to avoid the waste. But of course, it produced a big loss. So also some of the effects looking at the environment that we are still seeing, and now we will have also the COP this year to see how the attention was decreased to climate change and to environmental issues, putting in front the pandemic and the rapid recovery, economic recovery to the pandemic. So this to give some of the examples of where did COVID-19 impacted. So in what type of elements within the food systems, but also we can see on who the COVID-19 impacted. No. So let's see the vulnerabilities that food system stakeholders face, and especially in rural areas, where, as we were saying, most of the poor live. No, it's 80% of the extreme poor globally live in rural areas, as we were seeing before. So the majority of rural people was affected already by poverty, inequality, malnutrition. And these people are engaged, as we saw in the numbers before, in the agri-food systems, and they earn their incomes or their livelihoods through the agri-food system. So this includes farm laborers, producers, intermediaries, but also consumers in these rural areas. So the rural poor, in addition, they experience more overlapping deprivation in not only in food, but also in education, in access to basic infrastructure, than maybe other like urban dwellers that had more, that has had, as we were saying before, also less impact on their access to services, to infrastructure, etc. So let's see, just to have some number also of the impacts of COVID-19 in these different food system actors. These are percentages that show the average of a sample of 50 countries by the World Bank in a dashboard where they took 50 countries, including Colombia, Vietnam, Uzbekistan, Cambodia, Indonesia. I don't know if we have participants from those countries, but also other countries, so 15 total. And these are averages. So we see that across developing regions, incomes of rural households in a major part have been negatively affected by COVID. And this is due to reductions both in farm and in off-farm sources of income. And the total, for example, we see there is 62% of households that experience a reduction in their income. Then to come more to the mountain food systems and how COVID-19 affected, in reality, it added and amplified the challenges that we were seeing before, and that mountain food systems were facing already. And the impacts are similar to the ones we were seeing more globally, no? And they affected the access to markets, the supply chains, the labor availability also, because of the disruption in movement of workers. There were some bans on exports. There were impacts on tourism, and this was one of the questions before that then affected, of course, the incomes and the capacity and the capacity to access food and the food guarantee the food security. And then, as we were saying, this emphasized the pre-existing issues of inequalities, of marginalization, even of climate change, etc., and natural hazards, etc. So, just also on, just also on a let's say more forward-looking or positive look, the COVID-19 crisis also had as highlighted, as I was saying before, some opportunities to build back better, no, and has forced different stakeholders to look really at what needs to happen in the food systems to make them not only to recover, but also in the recovery to make them more sustainable. So this includes promoting organizational and social innovation. There was the question before on the online marketing, etc. Also, as the digitalization has entered much more into the picture and into our daily life anywhere in the world, I would say. And here you have some of the combined actions that have been actually proposed as a response and as a recovery of the COVID-19, in order also to make the food systems more sustainable. For example, increasing the adoption of technical institutional innovations along the supply chain. For example, what we were saying, the e-commerce, food procurement practices, diversifying markets, shortening supply chains, etc. We will go more into detail. Then strengthening the capacity to enhance food safety and nutritional quality across the food system. So having a more nutrition sensitive approach and looking at food safety consistently across the system. Increasing the capacity to reduce food loss and waste in an inclusive and sustainable way, also through innovation and technology. Enhancing the capacity agri-food enterprises and value chain stakeholders, especially small and medium enterprises, which were a key driver of food system and are a key driver of food system transformation and the post-COVID-19 recovery. So doing that also look at, as we were saying before, public-private partnerships in the way out. Also, one of the important parts of the important, let's say, actions that we have to keep in mind is attracting investment for the green recovery of the value chains, no? So of the food value chains. So not only addressing the short-term disruptions from the economic point of view, but also use that opportunity to lay the foundation for a sustainable recovery and maybe introduce sustainability conditions into the financial packages or financial products that are produced. This, of course, has to be very context specific, looked at the capacity also to apply to respond to those conditions, no? Because there is these non-negotiables that were mentioned before. And then lastly, improving the institutional and policy environment is also key, both at global, regional, national, but also subnational and local levels. And this includes contributing to the analysis of these trade-offs that we were looking. So really having the needed science and information for the policy dialogue, but also helping in the transition towards the more sustainable food system in the long term, no, not just in the recovery. This is what would give also a sustainability dimension, including it in the policy environment. Okay, then let's go more in detail, maybe on these were the main big lines of actions that we can consider as opportunities in moving forward towards more sustainable food systems. Let's look now at the level of mountains, how to build back better and how to ensure that actually mountain people are not left behind after this or during this pandemic recovery. And what are the different opportunities? And we see three main areas where we can start looking at. One is the sustainable land use practices. So continue encouraging and promoting the farming practices according to agroecological principles, according to conservation agriculture, for example, including land management practices to increase the efficient use of resources like terrace farming, like rainwater harvesting, gray water harvesting as well, drainage control to gain efficiency in water use, tree planting, etc. Also, sustainable grazing practices to improve the soil quality, the nutrients, the biodiversity, and in the end, the yields also in terms of pasture. And also looking at traditional and indigenous agricultural knowledge, which is one of the richness also in the case of mountain areas, and how they need to be essential in moving towards more or toward keeping or improving the sustainability of mountain systems in the face of the different challenges we've seen. Then another important part is the diversification of livelihoods. And here we have different things that we've discussed also already. Well, one is having a mix of food and crush crops, no? So for consumption, but also to earn incomes from it. Also improving the local processing of agricultural primary production to provide more added value in the place, in situ, sorry. In situ, like for example, for products as specialty coffee, herbs, livestock products that are high quality mountain products, no? Then also looking at certification schemes. This, we will have some examples on that later. Certification schemes that can ensure fair prices and that can also help moving towards these social and environmental benefits. This is something that also came out in the questions before. And then having investments that are not only on the food itself, on the agriculture itself, but in related sectors, like, for example, lifelong education opportunities or touristic activities, infrastructure, etc. So looking at the diversification of livelihoods also from the point of view of investment on different infrastructures that are needed. And then the policy coherence and inclusive participation, which is key. As we were seeing before, the agricultural, economic, social policies, they need to be aligned along the lines of these different dimensions. So they have to come together in a way and be linked to improving agency also within the food systems. This is especially relevant thinking about involving or the inclusion of women and youth that are that tend to be disadvantaged also in mountain food systems, and that need to be included and provided with the capacities to participate not only in the decisions but also in the activities, etc. So just to give some examples here of what I was saying, we have, I don't know, maybe some are familiar already with this. I will give some examples of the certification, labeling, and geographical schemes that can be a very good link between production and consumption within the mountains systems. I was saying the mountain partnership products is maybe some of you know it. I think maybe it was mentioned in the introductory session. It's an initiative by the Mountain Partnership that you all know, and you are maybe most of you are members of, and it's a certification and labeling scheme based on environmentally and ethical value chains. It promotes, as we were saying before, it's a way of promoting short local value chains, ensure transparency, trust between the producer and the consumer, and also at the same time a fair compensation for the primary producers, and while looking at elements like conservation of agrobiodiversity, conservation of ancient techniques, farming techniques in mountains, etc. Some data there, you have it in the slide. I won't go into details, just to say that well, some of the results that are seen is that with this kind of with this initiative, with this label of products, there has been in some cases 40% increase in the production for mountain products. In some cases 25% of increase in the selling price even, no? So this is where this kind of schemes can help getting this balance and these trade-offs that are sometimes difficult to manage, or to get the middle ground between outcomes. Also now it is expanding to new areas, like for example ecotourism services, and the initiative is partnering with different partners on expanding the distribution channels, but also on expanding and having a global network for mountain participatory guarantee systems, which is what we were discussing before. Maybe some of you are very much involved in that, and that are trying to link further the producer and the consumer, and establishing the assessment and the accountability more directly between these two. So this is an example of an instrument that would address all different dimensions of food systems. No, we've seen the production side, the consumer side. It can have an effect on prices, an effect on different sustainability dimensions. So this is one example, and a concrete example of this mountain partnership product is this cooperative of dried apricots in Kyrgyzstan, where organic sun-dried apricots have been traditionally cultivated by family farmers, and it's actually quite famous in terms of quality in Kyrgyzstan and also abroad. Drying techniques have allowed to extend the expiration period of the apricots, and therefore to improve their availability and their important source of energy in winter periods, for example. Just to say also that in this example, this farmer cooperative, it's serving both domestic and foreign markets. So it's not only for local. When we see the labeling, part of course will be local consumption, but the labeling normally is thought also for consumers that can also be interested from outside the actual area, so maybe urban areas or even abroad in other markets. In this case, the EU market is a very big market of this kind of products and labels. Here, of course, we come again to another of the actions that we were discussing at the beginning, that is the awareness of the consumers. No, if the consumers are not aware enough and sensitized enough in the need to, for example, conserve these traditions, conserve these production techniques, and also supporting these smallholder farmers, it will be more difficult that they are ready to buy this kind of product, but also the affordability. So the economic affordability is also entering into place. So again, a complex system. It is not just one solution that will solve everything. Another of the examples of another type of certification is this geographical indication that is broader. Let's say it's not specific for mountain products, but it looks at goods that have a specific geographical origin and has qualities and a reputation that are due to that origin. No, so it could be that it's a mountain product, but it could also be otherwise. And when they look at these factors and qualities, it looks at natural factors like soil, climate, water, but also human factors like local culture, expertise, tradition, similar to what we were seeing with the Mountain Partnership Products Initiative. And then it contributes to, of course, strengthening, it's similar to the other one, to strengthening the sustainability dimensions, but all of them, environment, landscape, biodiversity, strengthening the livelihoods, of course, by improving the market access, especially for smallholders, and based on these origin-linked products that have an added value. This produces, of course, higher incomes. And then also one important aspect of this kind of certifications is the potential for collective action. So how different stakeholders are brought together, producers in the first place, but also with consumers, also maybe with intermediaries in the chain, so that it's really a collective effort where the perspective of the different stakeholders is taken into account, and they can strengthen on that to add even more value. No? This is one of the examples that I had on the geographical indication, and it's based on a project, let's say, a support by FAO and the EBRD, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, that supported in Georgia a group of producers of dairy and especially of cheese to develop a geographical indication. I actually have a video. I don't know if it will work with the screen share. I will try, and it's a short video so that it's not just me talking, but you can hear it directly from the video. Let's try it. Can you see the video?
No.
Are you seeing the PowerPoint?
Yeah.
Okay, so I will share. Now, can you see the video?
Yeah, but you have to press play.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, it's good.
Okay.
It's a good image.
There is no sound, however.
You don't have the sound?
Yeah, no. Maybe you can also, if it's possible, to share the link on the chat.
Yes,
so
sure.
every participant, sorry, can see the video autonomously. Then can.
I mean, oops.
This is another challenge. Share video without problem in these platforms because it's 30%
So I'm not the first
success
one.
usually.
I'm not the first one, at least. Let me. No. Oh. Okay. I don't know if everyone had the opportunity to run through it.
Yeah, I guess everybody has already watched the video.
Okay. So this geographical indication, which is again another example to develop these livelihoods also in this to face this globalization and these different challenges, no, with markets and finding this niche that if it's accompanied with a good awareness raising and policy support also, it can really make a difference. Okay, then just another example, because the other were more on the marketing part. This one is more on the production, but yeah. So for example, agroecology. We said that this was one of the opportunities to face also part of the challenges that can be linked even sometimes to labeling or to certification schemes. And this was an example. For example, this was a case of a project in Armenia. The picture is not from Armenia, of course. It's from quinoa producers in Peru. But just to say that that in the end, agroecology is part of the heart of family farmers, and which includes smallholder farmers, indigenous people, pastoralists, etc. And it's a key element of the agroecology, and especially in mountain areas, is diversity. Is farming diversity of production, but it ensures the provision of ecosystem functions, the resilience, and possible, as I was saying, market diversification through different schemes that allow getting more access to markets, more incomes, but also contributing to eventually to human nutrition and human health. So this is what I had for this second session. As I said, we will only have a third one later, but before going into international processes, etc., maybe we can also have a time for discussion and then a break. Danilo.
Okay, absolutely. There are
also maybe if I may.
Yes, please.
Okay, just if I may, if it would be good also to hear from the participants their own experiences in these aspects, no, in certification schemes, in improving diversification of markets, but also diversification of activities. Like there was someone asking about tourism and the effects of COVID. So also I think it would be very rich, not just to hear from me, which is more the theory and some cases from projects, but also your own experiences for the benefit of the other participants, no? So just to encourage also this kind of exchange.
Okay, first of all, there are some questions in the chat. First of all, from Piyush, mountain people are also more resilient. Is their vulnerability got more to do with the so-called modern industrial standards?
Mountain people are often more resilient. This is a statement.
Yeah, mountain people are also more resilient. Is their vulnerability got more to do with the so-called modern industrial standards?
Well, in a way, I guess you could say that for vulnerabilities, no? That yeah, the modern standards have lowered sometimes the level of capacity of response because everything is in a way easier, more accessible. But in that sense, I guess, but still, I think it's quite. You can see it in the data, no? That the resilience in mountains is still a big challenge very often, no? So I don't know. It could be resilient to some aspects, but still there are many challenges.
Okay, another one from Anu. Isn't food insecurity an issue created because of the changing food habit or due to changing farming culture?
Well, food insecurity it has different causes, no? And the main cause actually of food insecurity in most cases is the lack of availability. So food production, which can have to do with the production practices, but mostly is a problem of access, and it could be physical in terms of like not having the roads or being isolated, not having the markets, but also and especially it's a problem of economic access and affordability. As I was saying before, one of the main problems for having healthy diets is actually that 3 billion people in the world cannot afford healthy diets. So the economic access is one of the main causes. More than the change in dietary patterns has an effect on the malnutrition. So on maybe on the rise of obesity and overweight. Because the change of patterns normally goes towards more processed food or more energy than food. But in terms of food insecurity, the main cause, I think, I would say, remain the economic access, so affordability.
Okay. Another question from Shalini. Maybe also domestication of lesser known high value wild species that ensure nutritional security and restoration of degraded lands and also reduce disaster risk like landslides and slope destabilization.
Okay, I guess this is more a comment.
Could be a comment or a missing question mark at the end.
Or maybe I didn't.
I'm not sure.
Get it. I'm going to the chat. Yes, I'm going to open the chat because sometimes it's easier. So this is.
It's the last one before the video.
Okay. Maybe also domestication of lesser known high value wild species. Yes, definitely. This is a big area of work, no, on wild species and under what is called underutilized crops. So this is definitely an area where it can improve nutritional security. It could even improve. It could even improve income generation through through marketing of these lesser known species. Quinoa, for example, it was not, well, it was a wild species, but it was already cultivated in Bolivia, in the Andes region. We saw the picture before of the quinoa, but quinoa was I don't know, 10 or 20 years ago, it was completely unknown apart from the South America region. And there was a like the boom with the quinoa and with from its nutritional properties, but also linked to the cultural dimension, linked to the smallholders in the Andean region, etc. And now you find quinoa almost in any country, especially in Europe. Well, especially in Europe, you find quinoa almost everywhere in all restaurants, etc. So this is an example of a maybe not completely wild. It was already cultivated, but it was a underutilized, let's say, crop that got a push and raised considerably, and then with its also effects on the restoration of lands, etc., depending on how it was cultivated, of course. So definitely.
There is another question from Danut. Are there mountain products with label Mountain Partnership product in Europe?
That's
I'm interested too.
That's a good question. I would have to look at the list. I can look at it in the break and look. But yeah, it's 20 products in total. In Europe, you mean European Union countries, or you mean?
We cannot hear you, Danut.
European Union. Okay. Okay. I doubt, but we'll check the list, and even if I find the list with all the countries, I can share it.
He wrote in European Union.
European Union. Yeah, that's why I say I doubt. But I will try to find a list that can be shared.
Okay. Another question from Anuradha. Most of the mountain people are dependent for food grains on low-lying areas. People in my area, northern mountains in India, grow vegetables and fruits. Can this also be a reason for food insecurity in such areas?
If I understand well, here the problem is that there is a consumption, especially of vegetable fruits, and not so much on grains. So yeah, this could be definitely a reason, because food security, at least part of it is the energy, the calorie intake, no, the energy, and normally grains are the ones providing more energy and calories than vegetables and fruits that provide other nutrients, vitamins and minerals. So I don't know if that is the question, but I'm surprised. I would maybe Danut can speak directly if it is the case that people then has their diet based on vegetables and fruits only, as opposed to grains. That is the problem.
Yeah, yeah, that is like the answer of my question. But yes, most of the people, like, it depends upon their paying capacity also, because all these things are imported from low-lying areas, and people, like, they have the land is not in that much, like, they have low land holdings, and mostly they're growing vegetables and fruits like apples, apricots and pears and all, and in vegetables, but not such in grains. Like, they are dependent, like they need to buy it. So that is actually my question.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. And yes, I would say definitely, because also here comes what I was saying before, the economic access, no? So if most of the energy would come from the grains, if they have to buy it, probably many people do not find enough, cannot access enough quantity of grains to fulfill those energy requirements, and therefore the food insecurity, rather than the fact that they eat eat more vegetable and fruits than grains. It's the fact that they don't have enough access to grains.
Yeah, thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Anurada. And if you have more questions, please open your microphone and your camera. And
at the same time, just to say that my colleague Jacopo put in the chat actually the list of the current countries for the mountain partnership products, confirming that no EU countries are involved. So yeah, there you have it. And then if we can hear about also any experience or that any participant want to share with the group on their own context or product or.
we need an icebreaker, please.
Hi, Piyush. I'm happy to share one
Please.
recent thing that I've been involved with in a very insignificant way, actually. So this is the work of a friend. She works on coffee, and basically she started off her work by looking at the different different systems that sort of grade coffee mostly in sustainable ways or forest friendly. And she found that most of these actually are not really suited for the Indian coffee growing practices. And some of them are actually on ground turning out to be relatively superficial. And working with primarily what was a community of forest dwelling tribes that were, you could say, sedentarized because that area was developed into a tiger reserve, or was they sort of started off by picking up some agricultural practices because they weren't really practicing agriculture earlier, and then discovered that their crops are being eaten up by wildlife, including boar, the wild boar, deer. And then an organization working with them encouraged them to move to coffee. So these are small land holdings, and these are not really cleared out. These are coffee that is planted in what is a remnant of the earlier vegetation, retaining a fair number of trees. So what they actually work on is a biodiversity friendly coffee. And the idea is that how do you retain or encourage biodiversity while growing coffee in an ethical manner? And it's been pretty interesting. I've been involved in a small way, so I wouldn't be able to go into greater details, but I thought this could serve as a icebreaker, as an initiator for more people to share work that they're involved with. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And if I may, just a quick follow up. What kind of challenges did they face in terms of the policies and regulations, for example, for growing the coffee in that area? If there were barriers in terms of regulations, and also in terms of markets, do they expect, or is there an interest in already identified in this kind of product?
Right. I think so. From what I know, there definitely were a lot of challenges. So one of the challenges was that there was already an established market system which relied on middlemen who sort of bought out in advance the entire production from most of these small growers. And this was also linked to a system where they gave them loans at a very high rate of interest, whether it was for family needs or medical needs. And in some ways, all these growers were tied into this relatively highly exploitative system where they ended up selling coffee to a certain middleman in the absence of any alternatives. Now, without knowing it, they were actually growing what could be described as organic coffee and relatively biodiverse friendly coffee. So when this friend actually started working with them, one of the first challenges came from the existing system itself, because these middlemen saw this new project as a threat to an existing system. So it took them some time to actually build trust amongst the growers, saying that, we are here for long term and we are not going to like disappear after a year or two. Because obviously people had other linkages to the middlemen, including dependence on them for loans and for times of need. There is, I think, in India, in recent years, especially amongst a certain urban class, a greater interest in sustainable practices. And here one is looking at a large community of people who are actually heavily into, say, birding or going out in the wilds from the perspective of, nature. And these are the kind of people that have sort of, I would say, been important consumers for this brand. Initially, they figured out that to get the official organic certification is going to be very challenging and expensive. So they haven't really gone for an organic certification in the classical sense. But they have done some work which basically is along the lines of certifying that the coffee is ethically grown, the people are correctly paid. So it's a slightly premium coffee in the market. And it's a very, I would say there's a lot of spontaneity in the way this brand has developed over a period of time. It's based out of Bangalore in India, which is actually relatively close to the coffee growing areas. And the community with which this has actually clicked the best is a group called the Soligas, and they live in and around a tiger reserve called Bilirangan Swami. So BR Hills Tiger Reserve. What they were growing was legal. It was on land parcels that were given to them as part of the settlement arrangement. So in that sense, they didn't find any regulatory challenges, but they did find, or they continue to find, I would say, challenges to the market. And the COVID also threw up challenges in terms of, accessing farmers, getting the produce to the city, and so on. I'll be happy to share a link to their page if anybody is interested in the chat box. Thanks.
Thanks. No, thanks. Thanks very much. Very real experience also of what we're talking about, and we see very clearly what I was saying before, also of the winners and losers. No, there's always in this looking at the whole system. whatever action will produce winners and losers. So the importance of looking also for coalitions and trying to set coalitions, looking at the different outcomes that are looked at. So very good example. Thank you for sharing it. I see the question on the chat also. On whether label mountain partnership products versus quality mountain product. Yeah. I don't think I can come back to you on that because I'm not directly involved in the group that is working on this mountain partnership initiative, mountain partnership products initiative, that is mostly managed by from the mountain partnership secretariat with different stakeholders, but I would doubt that it has a direct relation with this quality option in the EU regulation. So I would say it's different things, but I can come back to you on whether there is any effort on trying to link them.
Am I allowed to make a comment, Danilo?
Yes, please.
Hello. Let me just put my camera.
Yes, please.
Hello. Thank you for your presentation. I'm Joao from Portugal. Sorry if I'm looking on different directions, but the screen is one side and the camera is on the other side. This is more of a comment based on what you say. In my region, and it's a mountain region in the northwest part of Portugal, there has been a huge effort by even the local authorities, the local municipality, to try to promote the mountain products coming from our local farmers. Okay. But for example, they face a lot of problems, and one of them, for example, is that by definition, a mountain area here, it's a forest area. So, for example, the local farmers who keep their animals on these mountain areas in a free-range system, the animals spend 365 days outside, and they browse under the trees. So they do a lot of, they allow the forest to breathe, and there are no fires. These farmers, for example, they don't have access to the European money because from the satellite image, these animals are not in a field. What pretty much makes the difference if they can receive European money or not is that from the satellite, they can see the grass on the ground. And this is oak tree forest. So it's completely clean under the forest. It's spectacular for the wildlife. There's a lot of mushrooms growing there. These domestic animals, they do a tremendous ecosystem service, and these farmers are actually penalized because of the system they have. So you see a local municipality trying to promote something, and the local farmers saying that they don't want that because they are in a terrible situation compared with those that keep their animals in the conventional system, and they receive the European money because they can see the grass from the satellite. Just a comment. One of the challenges these guys face. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Joao, for sharing. And yes, it's part of this. Well, in this case, I don't know if it's so much a trade-off or again, winners and losers, no? And it's not always, doesn't work always in the right direction when we think about the sustainability dimensions. And it's clear that policies and institutional tools, like, for example, the European, in this case, grants, etc. Sometimes they don't enter into this approach and into really analyzing the whole system. No? So yeah, unfortunately, these things happen a lot, I think, still. But this is also where taking this systems approach and little by little having this systematically looking at the different elements, at the different winners, the different losers. Hopefully, we will start getting there to solutions and to grant systems, etc., that look at that overcome this kind of challenge. But yeah, no, thanks for sharing.
Okay, are there more comments or questions?
Hi.
Please.
Just going back to the immediate, the one of the feedbacks from, I don't know if I could pronounce his name correctly, Joao from Portugal, I guess. You know, I think this question in regards to how the existing, whether it's called EU grants, these are still a structural program, right? Like, in a sense, you have a multilateral, bilateral organizations and the granting bodies, but these are all informed by the very existence or the idea of what you have presented, right? In the beginning, that whole, they know at a very macro level what is the structured way of looking at how to address the problem. But the gap which I was initially referring to, right? The example our friend just gave might be also one of the classic case of why we should transform and take more account of the specificities. Because if we say at the core of this whole idea of proposing the transformative thinking is for the people, then the people have already spoken, right? Their traditional practice is actually supporting the entire forest ecosystem, and it's also a win-win. So this kind of a uniqueness and specificity is precisely the kind of a thing that the multilateral organization or even the existing structure should acknowledge. And perhaps that's the way, you know, when we talk about the transformative thinking, right? So you know, there is still a lot to be very much you know, if we were, I mean, if we are to really bring the transformative change, we should start asking the status quo in regards to this existing, whatever system is in place, whether in terms of through monetary system, regulation, policy that exists at the macro level. Perhaps it's that area where we need to change, I guess.
Yes, thank you very much, Anu, I think. Thank you, and yes, I fully agree. It's this issue of the specificity, you know, of the context specificity, local specification, as Joao also said in the chat, which is also difficult to get there. No, this is one of the big challenges for this. Not so much the multilateral, but especially the governments themselves at their level, but also especially with the big companies that are operating in the system. It's difficult to get to this local context and to really understand it from that local context. But I think I would say that compared to some, I don't know, even 10 years ago, the thinking has evolved considerably in starting to shift towards, okay, maybe we have to start thinking about even at those levels, no, about thinking about the local, the context specificities, even at policy level, more than before, because it was always in the discourse, but now yeah, it's more and more. But I fully agree that it's still a gap in a way, and that it's the key for when we talk about food systems, as I said at the beginning.
Okay, I guess now it's time for a short break. If Jose is fine for you, okay, I guess this is a yes. Okay, so thank you very much to Jose, first of all, and then to all the participants. See you in 5 minutes for the rest of the lecture. See you in 5 minutes. Thank you. Okay, so please.
Okay, thank you very much, Danilo.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we are now heading towards the last module, let's say, of this session of today, and which is, as I was saying at the beginning, on the international processes around food systems. That the idea was also, as I was saying, to know a little bit more about them. I'm sure some of you have heard already of, like, for example, of the UN Food System Summit, of other mechanisms that we will talk about, but the main idea being also that to get a bit more knowledge about it, and especially to see where is there interest or relevance in engaging with those processes, and how to do it, and identifying some entry points eventually. So, but it's a quite quick overview, and then the idea, I will try to talk not to talk much as against my habit, and I will try to go quickly on the initial slides, and then we have like a kind of activity prepared for you to look at some of the things that we've been discussing, and to make it also a bit more interactive, even more interactive. And by the way, thank you very much for the interventions, for the questions on the chat, the comments on the chat, and the interventions live. I think they were all really good and in like very relevant for the discussion we're having. So let's go to the international arena. Well, I guess that this is already a given for everyone about the SDGs and the UN 2030 agenda for sustainable development. We, I guess, all know that they are the world's commitment to end poverty and hunger, while simultaneously protecting the planet and establishing peace and prosperity for is the big statement. Just to say that as we've been seeing even during today, but also you've been encountering it, that food and agriculture are really at the heart of the 2030 agenda, and especially more directly maybe with some SDGs like SDG 2. We've talked about SDG 2 on ending hunger and malnutrition. Also, we've talked about ending poverty, SDG 1. We've talked about healthy diets and ensuring healthy life, which is related to SDG 3. And we've talked about sustainable production and consumption patterns, which is in SDG 12. But in the end, if we look at it, and if we really look at it as a system, we see that in reality, food systems are contributing to all of them, no? And all the environmental ones, SDG 13, 14, 15, all the economic or social ones. So in the end, we can say that, and actually it has been reported as such, that food systems is one of the keys to achieve the SDG targets and the SDG, the 2030 agenda goals, just looking at food systems. So just a quick word also on the transformation of food systems. We've talked about this also, how it can be there in the theory and in the big words, and then how to bring it to practice, which is definitely not that easy. But just to say also that this concept of transformation comes actually from the 2030 agenda, and because it was conceived as a transformative plan, and actually the UN resolution that launched the 2030 agenda and the SDGs is this you have here. It was called already Transforming Our World. So it already had this, and the definition that is provided for the transformation, as you see here, it's really focusing on an intentional, as opposed to evolutionary or causal or casual change, and it's also as being based on a societal agreement. So very much looking at the governance aspects that we were talking before about the winners and losers, how to manage that. So a societal agreement and factual understanding. So also looking at the evidence, at what science tells us about the trade-offs of one decision or another. So this is the academic, let's say, perspective of the transformation and the transformative change already from the 2030 agenda. And yeah, I just wanted to mention it, but of course then the way and the path towards the actual implementation, as we are discussing, is a long one. So just on the UN Food Systems Summit, I don't know to what extent you are, or maybe at different levels, aware of this, let's say, big event for, at least for the food systems this year. The UN Secretary General called for this summit and called for a broad range of stakeholders to come together in this summit and look at ways to deliver on all the 17 SDGs through the improvement of the food systems. The overall purpose is actually to engage this diverse range of stakeholders to identify what are possible ways and most powerful ways to make the food systems more sustainable. So trying to look a little bit and trying to look at possible solutions. The main outcomes that the summit has are, you have them here. First, there will be a statement of action by the UN Secretary General. I didn't talk about the dates, but I will come later, but the summit is foreseen in fall 2021. It's not completely confirmed. It will be September or in October. And there the UN Secretary General will make a call to action on how to, on what is needed to go towards more equitable and sustainable food systems. There will be also a large number of member states making commitments on how to advance towards those pathways of transformation. Will be also commitments and actions and coalitions of actions and of actors between different type of stakeholders. So it won't be just like a member state summit, but really looking at cities, communities, companies, civil society, citizens, development actors, young people, food producers, a broad range of stakeholders to also express their commitments and to start making these coalitions around food system transformation in reality, in concrete. And then to also foster these communities around food systems on together, like on youth, engaging youth movements, but also others. And in the end, providing a mechanism to follow up and review activities. This is still under construction, this mechanism. And basically the summit, the Food System Summit has, it focuses on 5 action tracks that are in the end the 5 main objectives that the summit has for the food systems. First is ensuring access to safe and nutritious food for all. So basically enabling all people to be well nourished and healthy and to realize the right to food. The second is the shifting to sustainable consumption patterns. So promoting, creating also the demand for healthy and sustainable diets, reducing food waste, among others. The third action track is the boosting, and objective is boosting nature positive production at sufficient scales. So looking at how through food systems act on climate change, reduce emissions, increase carbon capture, regenerate, protect critical ecosystems, reduce food losses and energy usage, as we were saying before, and this without undermining health and nutrition outcomes. So then the fourth is about advancing equitable livelihoods and value distribution. So looking at raising incomes, distributing the risk among the different stakeholders, expanding on inclusion, promoting full and productive employment and decent work for all within the food systems. And then the fifth action track is on building resilience to vulnerabilities, shock and stresses, so ensuring the continued functionality of the sustainable food systems in time. No? Then there are also a number of levers of change that will allow these action tracks to have an impact in the end, that are looking at gender, looking at human rights, at finance, how all this is financed, and funded, and that will look also at innovation. So all this establishes like the framework for the content and all the discussions and the thinking that is going through the summit process in terms of what are possible solutions and pathways along all these different elements, no? But bringing them together, we see there in the center as always the synergies and trade-offs between them that we cannot just disregard. Just as a like quick overview of the journey, this process in reality started already since last year, and there has been different stakeholder groups, different actors that have been brought together through different working groups, teams, etc. along the action track. There is also a scientific group that is working on different issues related to this. And there was a general call to ideas from people all over the world, from groups, from universities, from practitioners that provided a number of ideas in how to improve the sustainability of food systems. Then these ideas were classified and were analyzed, and the teams that are in charge of the action tracks came up with 200 what are called game changers, so game-changing solutions, let's say, to food systems transformation, that are there then analyzed and that will be brought to the summit. But before the summit, there will be also a pre-summit event in Rome, actually in a couple of weeks time, where already member states, but also different constituencies of stakeholders from the civil society, the private sector, academia, etc., will come together and will start to look at what all this process of bringing ideas, of dialogues in the countries are starting to emerge as possible way forward. Of course, with the clarity, as hopefully, as we were saying before, of the need of the context specificity, no need to contextualize. You can't just bring a solution out of the global arena. So just in terms of this kind of propositions, for the moment they are at the level of propositions for game-changing ideas on how to improve food systems. So here they are already classified from these 200 that I was mentioning. They have been classified into different clusters, and now they have 15 action areas across the 5 action tracks. So sorry for the nomenclature, but yeah, sometimes UN can become very complicated with nomenclature. And so we have the 5 action tracks here in the slide, and for each of them there are 2-3 action areas that regroup a number of possible propositions, no, the possible actions that can foster more sustainability. For example, on improving access to nutritious food, or on the enabling and motivating people to enjoy healthy and sustainable options, so from the demand side, or from managing food production systems sustainably, or here on the localizing food systems, how to look at localization of food systems, urban, but also not only urban, but rural in local context, local food systems. And then on the action track 5, on food system resilience and climate resilient development, etc. So all this here, it can be found actually in a web platform that's the summit secretariat. The summit, just to clarify also, I'm presenting it, but it's not an FAO initiative. It's a UN, the whole UN initiative, and from the UN Secretary General, but also with all the partners that are involved, which, as I said, it's academia, it's think tanks, it's private sector, it's civil society organizations. So it's the secretariat is composed of different type of stakeholders, and they have this website where you can find these action tracks that I was talking about, and you can also find there the different action areas And for each action area, you can find the number of game-changing propositions, as I was saying, that are being identified and classified and in a way endorsed within each of them. So just to give you the website there, but also to tell you that the activity that we have foreseen for later is related to this. So we will have time to go through the website and to go through different action areas, etc. Another of the aspects of the summit process, food system summit, maybe you've heard already about dialogues in your countries or in your areas or with organizations you work with. There is this what are called the food system summit dialogues, which are events that bring together different stakeholders also on specific topics or specific, like for example, at country level or thematically, or different organizations that come together. And the overall purpose of these dialogues is actually to contribute to shaping the pathways that can lead to this equitable and sustainable food system. So how different ideas can come into a pathway for a particular country or a particular reality. So bringing them more to the ground. There are these three types of dialogue: the member state dialogues, the global dialogues that are more thematic, and the independent dialogues that have been, as you see here, they have been, well, at this time there were 264. So it's more than maybe 600 independent dialogues that have taken place around the world on different issues, some bigger, some more specific, on how to go about getting more sustainable food systems. So this for me is one of the aspects that have really added value to this summit process. Apart from the declarations, etc., we are very used to, unfortunately, to them and to the fact that sometimes they stay as a declaration. But here, this engagement of dialogue at all levels is really starting to make different stakeholders think differently, or think that they have to think differently, which is already a step sometimes. Well, just as an example, there was actually a food system summit organized by the Mountain Partnership Secretariat that was on mountains and the sustainable food systems. It was organized in May this year, if I'm not mistaken. And well, here, sorry for the number, the amount of words and text, but basically it's a summary of the outcomes of that dialogue. As we see, a lot of the outcomes reflect many of the aspects we've been discussing today. But of course, the challenge, as always, remains to concretize it on the ground, maybe. But this is part of what is done also through the projects and through the interactions with local institutions, etc. Just to give you also two other international mechanisms that can be relevant in case you don't know them yet, and that can be relevant maybe to your work. One is this, the Committee on World Food Security, the CFS, which has a high-level panel of experts attached to it that provides the evidence and the knowledge for the policy decisions that the CFS takes. The CFS is actually an international, intergovernmental, but also multi-stakeholder platform that works together on food security and nutrition, but more extensively in reality on food systems issues at global level, but also they define policy products and policy guidelines that then can be adapted and can be, let's say, domesticated, if you will, at different contexts, and some are actually very relevant for mountain contexts. One of the last products is the CFS Voluntary Guidelines on Food Systems and Nutrition, which establishes a series of criteria and guidelines for ways of or aspects you to take into account when improving food systems and nutrition. So of course they are voluntary, and of course they are quite general. They are kept quite general, but then they need to be adapted and yeah, put into context for each specific reality. Okay, and then the second mechanism that I wanted to talk to you about is the One Planet network. I don't know if you know about it. It's the One Planet network. It's a coalition actually of UN agencies, but also with different stakeholders, countries, civil society organizations that are embarked in this 10-year framework of programs on sustainable consumption and production patterns. 10YFP. This 10-year framework of programs comes actually from the Rio +20 conference, where there was agreed to have this 10-year framework of programs, which include these 6 that we see here. There is one specific on sustainable food systems, but as you can see, there are others that are also very much linked to mountain contexts, and that work actually directly with the one on food systems, like sustainable tourism, sustainable public procurement. And the FAO is actually engaged as one of the organizations in some of these programs, more specifically in the Sustainable Food System Program, but also establishing link with sustainable tourism, specifically on agrotourism practices, and in the sustainable public procurement, looking at how to encourage food public procurement, for example, for schools, for school meals, but also for other social protection programs, but also for public institutions like jails or public offices, in order to have some sustainability criteria within those food procurement. So, as I was saying, many of them are linked also, or can be linked to part of the opportunities in the case of mountain areas, and can be a good entry point. They have also, you see there the website at the bottom, where you can find a platform of exchange between practitioners with different projects, initiatives, etc. I'm sure there are a lot of examples that can be relevant to you. So just to encourage you also to have a look and eventually to join the network as well, if relevant. Okay, so I will stop here. Let's say what I was telling you before, the theoretic part, and now we have some time, and hopefully we can leave also some time for discussion after the exercise to look at this activity that we prepared. It's quite simple, and it's also to allow you to have some time to go through the website I was telling you about on the action tracks and the game-changing propositions. No, so the proposal would be to go to this website. I don't know if you want me to copy it in the chat, or maybe Jacopo can copy it. Sorry, maybe Jacopo can copy it in the chat, and there you will find the different action tracks and the different action areas. So the activity that I would propose is that each of you, because ideally we would have done it in groups, but I guess I thought it would be a bit more complicated. So maybe individually, each of you, if you can think of one action track that you find interesting to you, and within that action track, you can go through the different action areas. You click on the green buttons here, and then go, even if quickly, then you will have time to go back to it later. But now, just to go through the game-changing propositions that you will see, and identify at least 3 that you find directly relevant to mountains work or mountains development. So, and then we will report back. Maybe not all of us, because it's a lot of participants and not much time. But maybe some of you can report back to the plenary on which 3 you found, which challenges you think these propositions would bring with them, how applicable they are in mountain context, etc. I don't know if that the exercise is clear and it's okay for you to go through that. The idea would be to have 10, even 15 minutes to go through the website, to go through the different areas, to the different propositions, and identify 3 of them, and then we can come back and report and stay maybe another 15 minutes in plenary. I don't know if that would work, Danilo, also.
Oh, it's a really great idea. I guess all the participants, we can gather again at 5:30. So they have 12 minutes. Would be the average between 10 and 15. So please.
Perfect. Thanks. And if you have questions in between, you can put them in the chat, and we will try to answer as quick as possible. So see you at 5:30 then. You know, or
Yes, please.
yes. Okay. Okay. Perfect. So welcome back, everyone. I hope you had some time to go through the website and through the different propositions. The idea actually was exactly that, to give you the opportunity to navigate and then maybe eventually come back or go back later if needed, if you are interested. Now the idea in these 10-15 minutes that we have, apart from discussing, I've seen some questions in the chat. I started to answer, but we can discuss them also orally. The idea now was that you can provide what you saw in those propositions that could be relevant for mountain development or development in mountain areas, and eventually, if you have also, I don't know, ideas on how that could be implemented, or how what challenges that specific proposition would face, that would be also good. So now I will call for volunteers. I hope there is always also someone to break the ice like before. And maybe what we can do is, since each of you, I guess, went through different action tracks, maybe we could go in order and ask for someone of you that went through the action track 1 and could like gather 3 of these propositions that they can share with us. So I don't know if there is someone who went through action track 1 and you can share. I see that, I don't know if Pranab, you had here in the chat, I don't know if you want to share it, like to explain it orally.
Yeah, hi. Thank you.
Hi.
I think I'll just skip my video on because there's a little connection issue at my end. Maybe I'll just use the audio instead. First of all, thank you so much for this wonderful presentation and session so far. A very interesting perspective. I have had the opportunity of also attending the dialogue recently organized by which you had mentioned just now a while ago, the Mountain Partnership for Food Systems dialogue. It was more to do with mountain issues. So since we also have some interests, as well as we also do, we are coincidentally part of the Mountain Partnership. We work especially in one particular state of Indian Himalayan region. And in that context, and some of the work that we have initiated recently, I picked up 3 different ideas from actually from 3 different action tracks, not just you although you wanted us to pick up from one particular track, but I ended up picking up 3 different tracks. So first, I thought it's more relevant, and it also resonates the kind of work that we are doing. The improve access to nutritious food. We have this program where we're trying to work with the communities just to basically in a two-pronged strategy. One is to be able to provide them an alternative livelihood, diversify their income through a D vitamin fortified mushroom variety, which is one of its kind. In fact, first Indian initiative to have promoted. We work with another kind of a social entrepreneurship group. So they have patented this technology and the variety, so which we are now trying to promote among the communities, because this is, apart from providing a new avenue of income, it will also address the large issue of nutrition, so which has been a major concern across the mountains, and as well as we also work in the plains. It's not, our work is not just restricted to the mountains. So that is one. The other point that I thought, that is from Action Track 5, action areas, which is basically climate resilience building. So, the point that I have picked up is long-term conservation of food diversity in gene banks in the fields. So, in that very project area in Bageshwar district of Uttarakhand, we also were trying to also look at the disappearing crop varieties, traditional indigenous varieties, which were disappearing, as well as lesser known, so that we are able to document their value, the nutrition, and also in a way maybe to look at the possibility of reviving those crops, including some of the very important millets, which were very prevalent in their local community in their consumption, but somehow they're losing interest because of various reasons. Also, climate change is impacting. And now in this process, we are also looking at the potential of having decentralized seed banks for preserving those varieties. Okay, and the third point which I thought was very relevant, which is livelihood equality. So that's from track 4. And here I picked up promote living incomes and wages in value chains of small scale farmers and agriculture workers, since we also work among small scale farmers in a very small village in a cluster of hamlets. So we have introduced the concept of diversification also, besides doing a range of very small but relevant interventions to be able to provide them the diversification, to be able to introduce them to both market access and market linkage, and also value addition in terms of what more can probably they do or can leverage from just adding something new into their existing practice, whether it is existing crops, it is existing way of doing farming, or maybe something more in addition, like for example, introducing homestays. So that is another way of we are trying to support the local farmers. So this is what it is from my end. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And well, yeah, this is exactly what we were looking for, to have this. It doesn't matter that it's 5 or like 3 action tracks. I think what is important is that you linked it also to actual actions that that are being implemented. So that was very rich. I would maybe also leave the floor for other participants that may. I've seen that in the chat you are also putting a lot of the propositions that you are that you have identified. I don't know if someone wants to comment part of it on the chat, sorry, on the invoice. I don't know if there was while the ice keeps breaking. I don't know what was if anyone found something in action track 2, because this was one of the questions that was raised up there from the last session. about the eating habits and how eating habits are considered in the food system transformation. And actually, the action track 2 is mostly about that, about looking at the transformation from the consumer end, from the demand side. And it has different propositions there on how to change, how to change or interact with food habits from the policy side and regulatory side, like even taxes on different type of products, or labeling of packages, like labeling on the nutrition properties, etc. Also, of course, nutrition education, food-based dietary guidelines that, of course, have to be linked with the other side, the production side. So it's always these trade-offs, because the question that was there, that was asked, I think by Shalini, if I'm not wrong, was also saying on the consumption of animal protein. How do we decrease it? Which there are ways of decreasing it through awareness raising, through education, through even eventually taxes or something like that, like some approximation to taxes. But then there is also trade-offs, because there are trade-offs on the part of the livestock producers, on the landscapes where livestock are already established, because it's not all intensive production systems, they're also extensive. So it's not that simple as just changing the eating habits, but just replying to that, that is action track 2. I don't know if there were some examples from there, but yeah, I will shut up now. I promised I wouldn't talk. Anyone, please, to share what they found, how they see it relevant.
Come on, don't be shy.
But I see here, yes, action area 1, a lot from the action track 1. Interesting that I thought there would be more from action track 3. Well, now I start seeing some, which is the action track 3 on the nature positive production, and more the environmental part and but yes, a lot on the action on the livelihoods. I don't know if some of the ones Anu, Shalini, yourself, I don't know if I read the first name, but you want to express it orally and maybe give it a context why you choose that one.
Hi, thank you so much. I think the 3 choices I made preparation clear from different sections. I I speak more from my experience in the mountains, with special reference to ecology and how agriculture is more forest-dependent agriculture in Himalayas. So more expansion of agriculture means more degradation of mountain forests, especially in Western Himalayas. So my context was that already indigenous communities and local people were practicing a lot of climate sensitive and nature friendly agriculture. So that means that was more stress tolerant and kind of more famine food that they were growing earlier. But slowly the shift has been more to cash crop and cash cropping patterns. So my proposition number 1 is understanding that the agriculture practices are more nature friendly, friendly agriculture, because this will not only reduce pressure from mountains, but putting more emphasis on using less chemicals and relying on less cash crops
will also give more benefits to reduce soil erosion. And if we are able to reduce soil erosion, we are also able to ensure that there is more slope stability in the mountain regions, because we know that Himalayan region is one of the most sensitive mountain chains in the world. And because it's very fragile, so landslides are very frequent, and the changing climate and increasing climate intensity is further degrading these ecosystems. So my option was first nature-friendly agriculture, and second, I believe that there should be more interactive governance. I am sorry, I am just randomly taking up these points from what I read. The second important point is interactive governance, because we find that there might be some regulatory options, but there is, it is very important that if we talk about policy effectiveness on ground and understand that what are the key enabling conditions of these policies, it's very important to understand that interactive governance is something that happens on ground. So it's more of bottom-up approach than top-down approach of governance, and enforcement of these policies in a much better way. I mean, if I talk about India, we have some of the best written policies in the world, but enforcement is something that is lagging behind. So that is my second proposition. And if I talk about the third important proposition, as one of my colleagues was speaking about, and you were also speaking about awareness generation. I think a lot of current customers and demand is more for organic food or something that is nature-friendly food with packaging that is more environmental friendly packaging. And this is something that can definitely ensure that our forthcoming aspects of what we talk about food are more sustainable in nature. This is a little too much what we ask for and demand, because as you mentioned that there are about 3 billion people who are out of reach of nutritious food. So talking about sustainability becomes really tough, but if we see the current market, emerging market demand as far as what people in the urban areas are demanding more, especially those who have access to food. They want to have more organic food, they want it more nature friendly, because they know now the consequences of these chemicals in land and chemical in food. So I think awareness is a very important proposition of this entire one planet context. So if I have to say 3, so I think nature friendly ways of production and consumption. Second is interactive governance, and third one is what I mentioned, awareness generation that can really make that difference. And awareness generation not only for people to understand what sustainable lifestyles and consumption patterns are, but also for local rural people to understand that this shift from traditional and indigenous crops and cropping patterns to more cash crop is not going to save them with the increasing climate change risks that are already happening in Himalayas. For example, if I see that if people were growing more native food, more thermine food, more stress tolerant food, for example, somebody talked about millets. We also know that mountains and especially Himalayas is also a hub of legume diversity. So that means that if more local food and these local indigenous crops are grown, they also reduce our food miles. So once they reduce our food miles, they also help a lot in climate adaptation and mitigation. So these are some of my propositions that I think I would like to put forward after reading the Game Changers action track. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much, Shalini. That were very, very good points, and I see that in a very short time, a very thorough analysis of the whole propositions, etc. And thank you for mentioning governance again. I think I also mentioned it several times, but when we talk about food systems transformation and more sustainable food systems, as I was saying, it's about managing the trade-offs, and that is inevitably through governance and through managing these winners, losers, asymmetries of powers, top-down, bottom-up. So that is a very important point too. Actually, it is just to say that the governance. I don't know if you remember in the in the slide of the action areas, governance is actually a cross-cutting area. Here, governance and planning. It's a cross-cutting areas for the 5 action tracks, so it's really, really important. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. I don't know if anyone else to share their thoughts. Okay. Well, I had here prepared some of possible solutions also, but I think you mentioned already most of them either on talking or in the chat. So well done everyone for a very quick analysis. And just also to mention that those proposals, as you see, some are more let's say higher level, like more up here. Some are more closer to the ground. But in the end, the main issue, as I hope has been clear throughout the whole session, the main issue is that one solution will not solve the problems of the system. No, we have to look at each solution. We have to look how it impacts the other solutions, and then try to find the right combination of solutions that work for all stakeholders. So then the governance. So this will be the main challenge, of course, in the way forward. But just also to if you continue encountering or close to these dialogues, these food systems dialogues that are happening in most of the countries, in these independent dialogues, they are still happening until the summit. So that gives you already an opportunity also to bring forward some of these ideas, no, in those dialogues, and maybe bring it closer to implementation, which, as we were saying, is one of the main challenges we have. So I don't know if anyone else has any other last question or last comment, or otherwise, from my side, it was a real pleasure spending this afternoon here with you. I hope it was informative. I hope it was relevant to what you were expecting. And in any case, I remain available. You will have my contact if you don't have it already from Danilo, and I remain available for any further exchange or communication. So thank you very much for the attention. I don't know if we would close here or any other comment, or Danilo.
Oh, I'm closing now. I would like to thank you very much, first of all, from my hand, and then I invite everybody to open the microphone and the camera if you can, and say a big thank to Jose for this very interesting lesson. And concerning the participants, we'll see you tomorrow at the same time. Thank you very much, and bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.